What's up, guys? Four-wheeler Doctor back again, putting back together a little 250 Recon motor. I'll leave some links to the engine removal and engine teardown. This one was smoking real bad, so I've had it bored out. Really, that was about the only thing wrong with it. I mean, we'll put some new clutches in it and a cam chain, but just going to show the reassembly here. The first thing we're going to do, actually I've already done it and it took a pretty good while, clean all this up, run it through my parts washer. Sometimes I used to just use brake cleaner, but before I got the parts washer. So got it all clean. It's no speck of dirt nowhere in it, so this thing should run good for a long time. First thing I need to put in it is the transmission parts. Let me find the box that they're in, which I think it's right here at my feet, and get it up here where I can get to it, and I will cut the camera back on in a sec when I get those in my hand. Alright guys, got everything in the box here. First couple items that need to go on. Make sure you don't drop any of your washers. This shaft here, this is the shaft that the clutch out the front side of the motor. This is actually the back case. The clutch hooks onto this, and second thing to go in will be this one. Actually, these need to go in about the same time. This is it does have a washer on it. This is the output shaft. I'm gonna clean the end of that thing up a little bit because it looks nasty. But this is the output shaft that the drive shaft, final drive shaft, ends up hooking to. And this one's in pretty foul shape. So what we do with these two, stick one in, kind of mesh the two up together, kind of like that, and slide them all in at one time. The output shaft goes on this big bearing down here, and the smaller shaft goes on this the upper bearing. Let's tilt it forward just a hair and slide everything together. You hold your mouth right, it'll go in there just like that. About need to get my little engine stand up here so I can pick this up off the ground. Alright, so got that. This does have, like I said before, a washer on it. Next thing to go in will be our shift forks here. They are marked. These are still laying how I took them out. So you got an F, a C, and a R on there. A few other numbers on there, but the F, C, and R are really the ones that matter. And what your intent here is to get all these pins facing toward the center of this hole here, because that's where your shift drum's going to go. As you can see, two of them are pretty well lined up. The other one will be kicked up a little bit. So I like to, actually let me get my engine stand up here so it'll make it a little easier to get this put on. So hang on just a sec. Alright, there we go. Got the engine stand up with just a couple blocks of wood nailed together. But first I'm going to put in is this rear one. It will go on this upper shaft here. Feed it in. Almost at the very bottom, there's a little groove that it will fit into. Just have to find that groove right there. Next one will be the one with the C mark on it, and it's going to fit onto this shaft here. About midways up. These things pretty well won't fit in but one spot. Alright, and then this is our front one, and it goes all the way up here on the top. You can actually visibly see the groove in there. Alright, so then you're left with the shaft. I'm going to clean it off a little bit. You want to install the shift drum here before you put the shaft on. Makes it a whole lot easier. Shift drum goes in with this end first. And as you slide this thing in here, you kind of want to halfway line those pins up that I mentioned earlier in one of these slots. You see, you got this is the slot for the lower fork, middle fork, and the upper fork. So just kind of line those up. You may have to lift up on one of the gears with your hand just to get it lined up. All right, so I got the front one in there, got the middle one, and the top one. So they're all lined up now, and then you'll want to feed this shaft through here. Wiggle it around a little bit. wiggle it around. And sometimes it helps to tap it in just very lightly with a hammer. It should line up pretty well and slide right down in there. And then once you get all the way to the bottom, it's all through all the shift forks now, and it's got to line up with that hole in the case. Keep tapping it, and you can feel it goes down another ½ inch or so, and it lines up. Okay, so that's your transmission in. The only other remaining thing is this gear here. This is a reverse gear, I believe. So it goes on this shaft here. Slide it on there and push the, I'm sorry, I said it goes on this shaft. It goes on this hole here. So it goes in right there and meshes up with this gear. The only other bearing you have that's got an open hole in it is this one here, and that's actually for the back side of the cam. Stand it up, that bearing there, so you won't use that this time. So now what I like to do is get a little brake cleaner and clean that mating surface. Put a real thin layer of RTV around it, and this thing does get a gasket. So I scraped all the old gasket off. We'll put the new gasket on and put this thing back together. You do want to make sure you've got your 2 dowels in here, one dowel up here and one dowel here. And the only other thing you have to put in there is on this case half is the screen, oil screen, I guess you call this, and this little tray that goes below it. You can see how that thing's kind of got a taper as well as this does. So you match those 2 tapers up, and the skinnier section goes in first. It slides right in here. So you want to make sure you put that in. I think that actually has to be put in before the gasket goes on, because the gasket covers up over this area. So I'll clean this side up with brake cleaner as well, and cut the camera back on right before I slide it all together. Guys, I'm sorry, but I didn't undoubtedly hit the button on the camera and it didn't catch, so I didn't get the video of me sticking this together. Biggest thing about it is slide your gasket on. Make sure you put your dowels on your back side. It helps to hold your gasket up good. Also want to make sure you install the oil screen and plate on this front of the crankcase before you put it all together. And mine had a few of these bearings that stayed on the shafts and stayed in the case, so you had to kind of tap it together with a rubber hammer, and it went together good. I just don't want to take it back apart and have to mess my gasket material up and all that. So this front case here only has 3 bolts. You got 1 here at the top on the inside of the case, and then 2 on the outside down here at the bottom. So tighten those up, then flip the thing around and put all the other bolts in on the other side. Alright guys, got all the bolts in there now. There was 10 bolts on this back side, and like I said, 3 on the front side. This is an older model Recon. Some of the Recons have some brackets that go on here and here to hold the little engine covers on the side, but this one doesn't have it. So, and now the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and install all the stuff in this back cover here. Flywheel, some of the reverse, or some of the gears and all that. So let me get those stuck in there. Or let me get them first, and then I'll cut the camera back on right before I get it all installed. Alright guys, next thing we need to do is put the flywheel on, and this is it here, and it's got a gear that goes on the back of it. I took all this off together and put a zip tie on it so I wouldn't lose it, and so you cut the zip tie off. And there's also a needle bearing in the back here. Make sure that goes on there. And this thing does have a keyway that it's got to go in. I didn't remove that keyway on the crank, so you'll just need to line that up with the keyway in the slot right there. Slide that on. Needle bearing just fell out. So slide the needle bearing on. Slide this flywheel on, and it bottoms out right there. I found that it's better to go ahead and put your nut on here with this little adapter recoil bracket thing. Tighten it down real quick just to kind of cinch it on there. Otherwise, I put these back covers on before, and these are magnetic, and it pulled this flywheel off. Then you might not hit the keyway back and all that. So Run this thing in with the impact real quick, back it all back off, and then you'll be ready to put the rest of your stuff on. Next thing needs to go in there is a little gear, kind of jack shaft gear here. It's got a snap ring, snap ring, washer, and then the gear. It goes right here close to the flywheel in that little hole there. So get your teeth meshed up, and it will slide in. And then the next thing is this gear here. It's got a little gear on the back side and a small one. This is actually what the starter meshes up with. It goes in this other slot. It doesn't have any washers on it. So you twist it around, the lit lines up in there. And then, look out, I'm about to drop the whole thing. And then the last thing to go in is this reverse safety lever thing. So it goes in the bottom down here. See if I can get this thing to stand up. Alright, goes in the bottom down here, and your spring latches on this little arm just like I have it there, and your arm needs to go in here and actually touch the shift drum. So it goes in kind of like this. You kind of have to have a screwdriver in order to get the spring to kick back up in there. So let me see if I can find one of those real quick. And the spring actually has to wrap all the way up around. You kind of have to twist this gear back, or twist this arm back some, and then your spring winds up. Let's see if I can show you a shot of it. Your spring winds up in here like this, and this arm touches that shift shaft, and that's what actuates when you actually push the red button and pull the lever to put it in reverse. So the next thing I like to do while I got all that put together is to make sure the thing is in neutral, because you would definitely want it in neutral to get your shift switch lined up right. So I'm not sure what gear it's in now. So rotate the transmission some and twist this thing around, and you can feel it shifting gears the whole time. And what you want to do is really make sure the thing goes into reverse, and then move it back one notch, and that would let you know it's in neutral. So it's turned all the way. In this case I'm turning it counterclockwise. So if you twist this arm here to simulate the pushing the red button and twist it one more time, that's actually reverse. So it's in reverse now. There you go. Now it's in reverse. And so what you want to do is rotate this back clockwise until you hear it click, and that's when it gets into right there. That's when it's in neutral. And this thing actually has a tick mark here to line that shaft up with, but it can be off. You can have it turned all the way around. So just make sure that tick mark's lined up, and it'll help you keep you from breaking your sensor when you get ready to put that all back together. Alright, so I'm going to hit this with the impact. Grab the stator cover and get it ready to go back on. Also has a gasket to go on here too. I see I got one dowel here. I'm missing a dowel here, so I'm going to see if the dowel's in the other cover. Make sure I put it on there to help hold the gasket. I'll cut the camera back on right before I stick it together. Alright guys, got the two dowels in here now. Got a little thin layer of RTV stuck around here. Go ahead and stick the gasket on. It slides on here like this, lined up over each dowel. And also one other item you need to stick on there is this shift shaft. Don't forget to stick it in there. It goes in right here above the where the reverse safety lever goes. I may have to stick this thing in here. Oh no, slide the gasket back just a hair and it'll let it slip by. Alright, so that goes in there, and I think I've got that oriented in the right direction. It does have a little snap ring on the back side of it and a washer, so make sure you put those in. This rear cover has all kind of stuff you got to get lined up. The first major thing is this shift sensor that I had mentioned earlier. Thing's got an N stamped in it there, and this little bar that's in here has got a long side and a short side. That long side has to be pointing toward that end, and that'll help it line up once you get it stuck together in here. Also, the other thing you need to line up is this This is the emergency shifter little arm. Has to line up in this hole of that shaft that we just stuck in there. So it takes a little bit to get all this together and get it lined up like you want to. What I like to do is try to get that the shifter in the very center and slide this thing on here. I try to look to make sure that that shifter is going in the right direction. You had to drop it down just a little bit. Look like it's going to line up with my hole on the shaft. So slide all this together. Kind of have to let it go down on there kind of square to get it to go over this shaft here like it should. And wiggle it down there just like that. One way to check to see if this if your shifter arm hit the lever correctly is to rotate it and put a little bit of pressure on that shaft that you slid through and make sure there's no slop in it, that you can slide it twist it back and forth and it rotates that shaft, and it does. So we've got that lined up correctly. I've had those mess up in the past, but it doesn't happen very often. So now I'm going to put all these bolts in around here. The rear cover has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bolts all the way around. So we'll stick those on, and then we're going to put this little guard over the top of the output shaft next. So I'll cut the camera back on when I get all these put in. Alright guys, I got all bolts tightened up in there. I didn't mention it earlier, but I do like to go around and torque these bolts down, these small 10mm headed bolts. It calls for like 10 Newton meters. It's like 7.5 or 8 foot-pounds, so that's what I usually try to put them down, just to make sure that they're all tightened down evenly and you don't have a loose one here and there, because that sometimes can tend to lead to a leak. Alright, so what I'm going to do is tighten this the crank bolt down here on this pull start. It's 14mm. I'm not sure what the torque spec's supposed to be on that. I'm just going to hit it with the impact and tighten it down, because it's kind of tough to hold and torque and all that when the motor's not put together. So hit it with the impact. That one's good. And now I'm going to install this cover here on that rear shaft. Probably going to put a little bit of grease around that to make sure that O-ring seals up. Stick that on there with the 2 bolts. And I've got to do something with this wire here. I can't remember what it hooked to, but it's broke, as you can tell. So I'm going to have to do a little work to it. Oh, actually, it goes in here. There's a sensor right here that's supposed to have that plugged into it, and it hadn't been plugged in a while, so I'm going to have to fix that. You shouldn't have that problem with yours. Alright, so let me stick this on, and I'll cut the camera back on after I figure out what I'm going to do about that wire. Alright guys, this is the sensor for the reverse, turns the light on the dash. I just made a little connector here, barrel connector, to tie it on there. Just wanted to show you that repair. Those things are bad about breaking off anyway, so somebody had already put that wire on it. So that's how we're going to fix that. So that's on. Next thing I'm going to do is stick the starter on here. Probably push these engine mounts back in. Starter is right here. It slides in just like that, and stick 2 bolts in it. And then, like I say, the engine mounts, they just slide right in here. And I probably am going to go ahead and stick the that output boot there on. That'll just be one less thing I have to do when I get it on the bike. Might be a little bit easier, or it's probably going to be a little bit easier here on the bench than it will be when I get it put on the 4-wheeler. So let me get the 2 bolts in the starter, that output boot on, then I'm going to flip it around to the other side, and we'll start on the cam chain and all that stuff. Alright guys, first thing I'm going to do is put the oil pump back on, but before I do that, I'm going to rebuild this thing. I got the new oil pump gears from Honda for it. Just a precautionary measure. There might not be nothing wrong with it anyway, but I'd like to at least know I'm gonna have good oil pressure when we do get it rebuilt. So this is the oil pump here. It's got one Phillips head screw that holds it all together, and then there's also a E-clip, they call it, right there, and a washer. So pop that E-clip off, and then the washer comes off like that. And then you've got the back cover of the oil pump, and those are your oil pump gears. That's what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to be replacing. Just those gears meshing together is what actually makes your oil pressure. So if anything, replacing them will definitely get you back up in your oil pressure. So all you have to do, the little kit comes with, well, actually it's just one piece. Both gears come together. Some of these you buy, they actually come as two separate pieces. So slide these in there into your cover like that, and then you've got the shaft here that slid out the front. It's got a flat spot in it, and you just want to line that up with the flat spot in the center gear. So feed that in, twist it around a little bit. Not holding my mouth right. Right there. Okay, see, they're meshed up now, and then all you have to do is I'm gonna clean this off, but stick the back cover back on, just like that, and stick the screw back in the back side right here. Tighten it down. Drop it and pick it back up, and finish tightening your screw down. Alright, so that's tight. Put your washer back on and your E-clip back on. And as it usually happens, I can't find a pair of pliers. There's one. There you go. Alright, that's in there. And the only other thing with these oil pumps is there's these little dowels. They need to go in here. You got one on this side and one on the other side. It was still in the package here. So make sure they're in, and these aren't seated all the way up, because I've got the covers rotated just a hair. Tap that in. There you go. Both of those are seated in, and then you just stick this in to the hole here like that, and there's a little arrow on there. It points up just to let you know that you've got it in correctly. So tap it down so that those dowels line up, and then stick your 2 bolts in it just like that. Tighten those up, then we'll put a chain on it. So let me get those tight, and I'll cut the camera back on. Well, I don't know if I'll cut the camera back on or not. So I've got to tighten the bolts up, but the next thing, you need to put your chain on there and your gear with this little snap ring. So I'll do that and cut the camera back on when I get it all together. Alright, there you go. Got the chain on, the snap ring. Just kind of clock that gear around just so it lined up with the notch part on the oil pump shaft. There's really nothing to time up or anything like that on it. So next thing to go in will be your cam. I might have said cam chain, but I meant oil pump chain on that. The next thing is your cam. I do have a new chain to go in this one, and I like to time these things up. That's one reason to do the back side first, to time it up. Go ahead and get it at the timing mark back here in the back. The hole is right here, and what you want to do is rotate this thing around until you get the T mark in that hole right here, and your piston should be, or your rod should be, stuck almost out the top. So let me rotate it around here. I'm actually going backwards, but in this case it really doesn't matter. Well, I don't know, it might not matter. Let me see if I can get it to spin all the way back around. The stator kind of gives it a little jumpy feel. So the T mark's right there. I'm not going to be able to hold it right on the T. What's going to happen is I'm going to have to rotate this thing back to get the cam right in the right location. So let me grab a 14mm socket. I may just try to do this, try to lock that thing up on the starter there to keep it from rotating around. And I can't see in the hole now. So it's on the F mark. So there should be a T mark right there after it. Yep, just missed it. That's pretty close. So you want to make sure that thing's on the T mark before you put your cam and cam chain back in there. And on your cam chain, this here is actually for, I'm guessing for a 350 Rancher or 250 Recon. This naturally is a 250 Recon. So we line up on that 250 tick mark. And slide the cam in. Just like that. And there's actually a little tick mark right here. That's what you're trying to line it up with. So you line that tick mark there with that tick mark there. As you can see, that's pretty close. I just need to make sure we're on the T mark at the back before I completely slide it all the way in there. So let me do that. I can't do it with the camera on just because I got to move everything around, but I'll cut the camera back on when I get it all set up just to show you what it's going to look like. Alright, I got everything lined up, I believe. Let's see if I can spin this thing around so I can show it all to you. Okay, so if you get the tick mark here on the T, I'm going to need a better flashlight than that. There we go. So let me find the T mark right there. There is the T mark in there, and with that T mark on there, you see on the front here you've got the 250. Come on, camera, focus. I need people to tell me to focus like that sometimes, but they don't. I'm usually out of focus, just like this camera. So anyway, your tick mark, I'll see if I can halfway show you. Your tick mark is right there. There it is. You can see the tick mark, and then the line above it, it's pretty well lined right up. If you get over here to where you can see the line straight on, you can't see the tick mark. So anyway, that's in there. I did have to tap the cam with a hammer to get it to seat all the way in, and so now the other thing to do is put the cam holder bolt in here. It does have some Loctite that goes on it and a little arm that sticks back in behind there. So it looks like this. So stick that arm in there, put a dab of Loctite on it. Have a Loctite. Slide the arm in. That just locks on that bearing that's on the cam there and holds it in. So let me get that tightened down. I'm going to torque it down to the same 10 Newton meters or whatever, and then I'll show how to put the tensioner arm on and the tensioner in. So I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright, so now this is the tensioner arm. I did think I had enough to put a cable tie on here, a zip tie on here to hold this washer. There's a washer, so it's a bolt with a shank on it, then a washer, and that goes in to actually tension the cam chain. It bolts in right here to this bolt. Let me see if I can get it started by hand. Slide that back so it goes in like that, and then your tensioner will be mounted here. So let me grab a 10 millimeter. Got this time keeping up with them. Tighten that down. Make sure when you get it tight that it's still got some movement to it. So got that in, and then it's time to put your tensioner in. This is what the tensioner looks like, and how it works is it's spring loaded, and what you do to get it in, you push in on this little arm on the top right here, push it just with your fingernail, push your plunger all the way in and hold it. Push your plunger all the way in and hold it, and then take a piece of wire and stick it in this hole right here, and it will lock the tensioner like that. And then you can just take and bolt the tensioner in right there, pull that wire out, and the tensioner will extend out and hold tension on your cam chain. So just like that, just like that. Alright, so like that, then you pull your wire out, and there you go. Now you've got tension on your chain. It should be timed up just right, since you've got your T mark lined up with your 250 mark on the front here. So that's pretty much all there is to timing one of these up. That's usually the biggest fear of people on these things that I've noticed is they're scared to death that they're going to get the timing off. But if you just make sure your T mark back here is lined up and your tick mark's lined up on your cam, there's not really a whole lot of in between. If you're one tooth off, it's pretty obvious. So I got all that done. We'll torque down those tensioner bolts just to make sure they're good, and then we're going to get ready to I don't know what I'm going to put in next. Might put in might go ahead and change out the clutches on this thing. So I may jump over to the vise and get the clutch replacement set up. Alright guys, so I pulled the clutch packet out of this clutch bell, got it over here in the vise. What I like to do on these is just take a pair of vice grips and press down on the clutch just a little bit, and it relieves the tension on these, on these E-clips. You can press that down and then stick a screwdriver in there and twist that E-clip off like that. I'm probably going to have to cut the camera off because I like to have two hands on this, because sometimes you have to catch that E-clip because it flies through the air like a Superman. Probably faster than Superman. But anyway, let me pop those off. What I may try to do is rotate that thing around here, and then just take a pair of needle nose and pinch those off. So you got 3 of those. So you take those 3 off, and then I'll cut the camera back on and show you what you wind up with. Right now I can get 2 of them. I'll flip the vice grip around over here to this side and press down on it, and get that 3rd one off, and then show you what we got. Alright guys, got all 3 of the clips off. Unhook that from the vice grips, and I'm going to go back over here to the cart so I can halfway show you what we got. Alright, so this thing's got like a funny shaped washer on it that makes that spring loaded. So what you do is pull the first cover off, pull this funny shaped washer off right there, and a lot of times as this one does, it'll have all kind of crud in there. You'll want to take a screwdriver and scrape all that out. It's friction material. And then the next washer, it's kind of a flat thing with, it's got a little lip on it, and that lip always goes up or goes toward the top. And then you're left with the clutches with the springs and all. And the easiest way I found to get these out, I'm gonna see if I can clamp this thing just like that, and is to pry up on these, and it relieves a little bit of tension on them, so you can get them to pry up some. You have to do all three of them pretty much at the same time. There you go. Alright, so they'll slide off. It actually didn't relieve a whole lot of tension off of them, so I'm going to just keep prying it up until they come completely off. And then you have to kind of lay it all out together, put all the springs in there and put all the weights in. They call these clutch weights. Put all the weights in there together and put it all on at one time. So one thing, I need a bigger screwdriver. The other thing, I need two hands. So let me get this slid up, and then I'll cut the camera back on. Alright guys, I got them off there. Just wanted to show you, these clutches aren't in real bad shape. They do have some wear on them, and the owner is just wanting to get as much as they can out of this little four-wheeler, so I went ahead and replaced them, or I'm going to go ahead and replace them. Probably the easiest thing is going to be to stick these things on here and start fishing the springs around as I go around, and then I'm going to end up having one spring that I'm pretty much going to have to fish on there, and hopefully it'll line up. So let me get them halfway lined up on there. I'll cut the camera back on and try to show you me putting the last spring on. Alright guys, I'm not real sure how that camera angle is going to look, but we'll give it a shot. Maybe turn it up just a little bit. There you go. Alright, so I've got all the clutch weights in there. I still do not have this the next to the last spring in, and what you can do is get it close, open that clutch weight all the way up and push the other one in, and see they snap right on there. So now I'm only left with the one clutch weight to get on. It's probably going to be easier to hook it on this part as opposed to this part, just because it's kind of tight in there. So what I'm going to do is push this all the way in as far as I can, and take a screwdriver and try to pry this spring out. It ain't got to go far, but pry the spring out until you can catch it on that that front little edge of the clutch weight. It's bad close right there. There it is. Okay, so what I did, show you the little setup here. I stuck the screwdriver into the spring and just pulled the whole screwdriver and spring and everything over until it catches on here. So with that done, that's all you have to do. Wiggle your screwdriver out of there. Your clutch weights are down all the way on here, so it should be good to go. Put it back together. I'm gonna get the other parts over here cleaned up. Like I said before, just wipe this piece off and get the little bit of crud out. This other one, you're gonna have to scrape that off with a screwdriver. So let me get all those cleaned up. I'll cut the camera back on right before I assemble it all for good. Alright guys, got all the washers cleaned up, as you can see there. They just slide on. This one here, like I said before, goes on with this little lipped edge toward the top. Just line that up over your dowels that stick up. And then this is the washer that's real crucial. It's got a bevel to it, and it's I guess this would be kind of cone shaped up is how it goes on there. So it's higher in the center than it is on the edge. And then the last piece is this top plate here. It will kind of halfway line up over top of the dowels, but you can't get the clip on there yet. So what you have to do is twist this around like that and clamp the vice grip on it to expose the clip or the groove for the clip and that shaft. So let me stick that on, and then I'll stick our 3 E-clips on, and that'll be done. Alright, there you go. The clutch assembly is assembled. You do want to make sure that those E-clips are spun around, that the open side goes toward that little notch that little raised portion of the clutch cover. And then pretty much just put this back together. I'm going to clean the inside of this bell out. But what you do is just stick this in there and just rotate it around, and it'll eventually fall down into those bearings there. Sometimes they can be a little aggravating, but just keep wiggling around until it falls down in there, and then you'll be ready to bolt that back up. So let me get this together, and I'll cut the camera on right before I stick it together. Alright folks, got all the cam chains in there. Now the next thing we're going to do is put all this gear change stuff in here. First item you're going to want to put in, get all these parts out of this bag here, is there is a washer that needs to go on this shaft here. Let's see which one of these it needs to be. Appears to be that one. You got two of them. One of them's got a bigger hole in it than the other, so the larger hole goes on there first. Alright, so set the smaller hole one to the side. Next thing to go on will be the star piece that goes in the center there. This thing here, and there's also a little dowel that goes in that hole there as well. So stick that in there, and it helps to take a screwdriver and pry down on this arm like this, so you can get some room to get that star piece in there. Goes in just like that. Alright, now you want to put this thing that looks like a divot tool in here, and it slides over this shaft and then hangs off the side of your star looking piece. Sorry about that. Alright, now need to put the this big old washer looking thing and the bolt in it. Make sure you put some Loctite on this bolt. I've had these back out before, and it will make it do all sorts of crazy stuff. So put a dab of red Loctite on there, and this washer does have a little tag right there, tab that needs to fit in that slot on that star piece. It actually, I think it'll only go in there one way, so tighten that up. I don't have my impact ready right there, so I'm going to hit it with the torque wrench real quick. Alright, so get this torque down. If I can get the torque wrench on it. There we go. Alright, that's on there. Alright, now the next thing to go on will be this arm here with the little spring on it. It slides over your shift shaft there too, and your spring will go over this tab at the top, and then the one spring here, the other spring hooks on this the thing that looks like a divot tool that we put on earlier. Take a pair of needle nose and clamp it on there just like that. That goes in like that. One thing you want to check here, this has got a little bit of a shoulder that sticks off the back of this part. Make sure it goes in between these forks, because you got to have this thing pushed all the way in there or your cover won't go on when you do get ready to put that on. Alright, next item is we got another washer. That's another one of the big ones, and this arm, it goes in, and it's actually keyed, has a certain keyway it needs to go into, so it'll only fit in there one way. And I don't think, actually I think I'm gonna have to pull that back off. I believe I'm gonna have to put this clutch on before I can get this arm to go on there, because I think the arm is gonna hit, yes, the arm would have hit this clutch, so you have to put the change clutch in there first, and then you can slide your arm over like that. And this arm goes in next. This shaft here goes in this little hole over here to line everything up like that. Alright, so that's pretty much how all that goes in. I am going to have to tighten this nut up. I will tighten it up and stake it. Also going to stick this clutch on too. Same thing. One thing with this clutch, to get it does have a washer on here too. So make sure you rotate this thing around till you get the change clutch. It has a little dent in one spot on, actually 2 spots on it. If you line that dent up with these gears, it'll let this whole thing slide on there all at one time. And just like that. And so let me get the sockets and tighten these down, stake them, and then I'll cut the camera back on right before I put the rest of the stuff on here, because it still has to have a washer and a bearing and all that. So I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright folks, got these tightened up, staked in. Also this nut here, just to make note, it is a reverse thread, so it'd be righty loosey, lefty tighty on that one. Alright, so put this shaft back in here now. It will fit in there now with the clutch installed. And we have this gear, or not gear, bearing piece that goes in the center of your change clutch. It just slides in, and this little trick here goes in with this side goes into your change clutch, and the fork part of it goes on this little bearing here on this arm. Stick all that in there. You've got the ball thing with the springs. The spring goes toward the motor, so fit that on there. And one last thing, you've got one remaining washer. It has a smaller hole in it, and it goes on that shift shaft. Alright, so that's everything that goes inside the front cover of the motor. I am gonna clean this up with some brake cleaner and put a little RTV on it and stick the bolts back in it. Actually, I'm sorry, I have forgotten one part. The I guess you call this oil filter. The part that goes on here, this washer, I'm gonna have to clean this thing up, but it snaps over here, and that's what the oil actually squirts out of there, and it catches all kind of crud, as you can see from this one. Need to put that back on. There's 3 bolts that hold it on. So just about forgot about that. So don't want to forget that, because it does do something. So I'll stick that back on, get it cleaned up. I'll cut the camera back on right before I slide the front cover on. Alright folks, got the little washer oil filter cover thing on here, whatever you want to call that. So I'm ready to put the front cover back on. One item I did forget was the triangle shaped piece. It just actually fell off, so stick it back on there. You want to make sure that thing stays in there. It won't shift gears right. There's 2 dowels. One dowel still in here. One dowel's in the front cover. This bike, I didn't break the cover, or the not the cover, the gasket on this thing. So I'm just going to reuse the other one. Just put some RTV around it to make sure it seals up. So let me slide this thing over here. Really, the only shaft you have to worry about lining up is this one for the shifter here. So slide this thing on. You have to kind of pull out on the gasket here a little bit, because the gasket has to go around behind the clutch. Let me get the gasket flipped around back behind the clutch. There it goes. And then it will slide on back. I'll let you see what I'm talking about here. The gasket's actually bigger. See where it's hitting the clutch there? We'll take a screwdriver and pry out on that gasket just a little bit, enough to let it slip past. It's pretty tight, little tolerance. This is about the only Honda bike that this actually happens on. The only one that I know of. So let's flip that gasket out a little bit so it slides past the clutch. There it is it. And it get everything lined up together just like that, and it went together very smooth. Didn't even I hit it with my hand just then, but I didn't really even have to. See, it's closed up. There's 12 bolts that hold this front cover on. Put all those bolts in, torque them down to that 8 foot-pounds, 10 Newton meters, whatever. Like I said, this is an older bike, doesn't have any of the brackets on it, the engine covers and all that. Your bike might have that, so I'm not going to put those on this natural because I don't have them, but yours may. So just make sure you get those on. And the next thing I'll do is put the electric shift gears in here. I'll cut the camera back on after I get all the cover bolts tight and get ready to put those gears in. Alright guys, now it's time to put the electric shift gears in here. If you got a foot shift, you don't have to worry about this, but this is an ES model. So first gear to go in is this one. It's the biggest one of the three. The big end goes in first, sits down in there like that. Next one will be this little funny looking thing here. It's got a little dent in it right there. The dent's supposed to go toward the outside, so it's got a kind of a keyway that it's got to fit into on this shift shaft. What you want to do is center that thing up. There's actually a little raised up portion here, and you want the raised up portion to be covered just right behind this, so it's not one way or the other above or below that raised up portion. And then the last item is this little small gear here, and the smallest part of that gear goes in first, so it fits in there just like that. And then you bolt the shift motor back on. One thing that I like to do just to make sure everything goes back together good is take that shift angle sensor out, just to make sure that you get it keyed up right, because this has got a half moon notch on it, and if it might have been in first gear when you took it apart, and now it's in neutral, so you just might want to take that shift angle sensor out just to make sure you don't mess that thing up. Alright, so bolt this on, and then get started on the top end. I'm going to lap the valves in it and all that, so I'll do that next, and I'll cut the camera back on when I get everything set up. Alright guys, now I know I haven't got the cylinder on the bike yet, but I'm going to go ahead and change these valve seals out and lap the valves on it. This is about the the second specialty tool aside from the flywheel puller that you have to perform this little rebuild. And you can purchase these things at the or purchase them from the parts store, or actually rent them, I believe. This is a valve spring compressor. It's kind of a C-clamp looking type thing. It's actually for automotive purposes, but it works great for these ATVs. And what you do is this plunger looking part here hits the bottom of the valve. The fork piece hits the top, and it releases the little retainers it's got in there. Two little retainers. They're wedge shaped pieces of metal. Lock it down like that, and you can pull the two retainers out. There's one. Ease up on it a little bit. There you go. The second one stayed stuck in the cap here. The other retainer's in there. So you knock it out and pull your valve springs off. Flip them over, and then push your valve out. This is the intake valve. The valve looks real good. I'm gonna clean it up with the wire wheel. Also clean up the combustion chamber there. So let me pull the exhaust one out. I'll get them cleaned up real good, and I'll show you how I lap them and replace those seals. Alright guys, got the combustion chamber cleaned up, run around that mating surface with some Scotch-Brite. Still got the valve seals in here. I'm going to go ahead and pop those out. Makes lapping it a little easier. Just stick a screwdriver under it and pry the little valve seal up. I'm going to go ahead and take both of them out. And then what you want to do to lap these things, we'll do the exhaust one here first. take the valve. I got some of this valve grinding compound. It's just some gritty water-based like paste stuff. Just dab it around the top of the valve there at the seating surface. Stick it back in the valve guide like that. And then I got this little tool here. It's a suction cup that will suction to the top of the valve. And some people take a drill and hook it to the stem of it and do it. And I just like this way. You kind of apply a little pressure and work it back and forth like you're starting a fire, and kind of pull up on it, and it'll get some grit in there. I can't get this thing to stick to it. So pull up on it and it'll get some grit in it, and you just keep working it like that, and it will clean that surface up that it mates to. Just like that. Just take and wipe this off, and it'll show you the seating surface there. Looks real good on that one. I'm not sure if you can see that real good. Sorry about that, guys. The battery pack went dead on me. Alright, so I got it lapped up, and see if you can see the little light gray area on it. Is very consistent all the way across. It's about I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch wide. This will also show if you have a valve that happens to be bent, you'll have a light spot here and there. It might not be quite as wide. So this is the exhaust valve. I'll do this the same way with the intake valve, and wipe off the grinding compound out of both of those ports. And then all you have to do is just stick your valve seal over top here, and that's all there is to it. Sorry about that, guys. I had somebody pull up. I was trying to hurry up and finish that last video, but I will show you how to push these seals on. Sometimes they say you're supposed to use a special tool. You can just use your finger. So it just slides over top. It's kind of spring loaded, so you just rock it to the side like that. It fits right on there. Put your lapped valve back up in there like that. Make sure your valve spring goes back in there the same way. I don't really know what difference it makes, but a lot of times they'll have a closer spacing on the spring toward the bottom than they do on the top. And put your compressor in there, slide your two retainers on, and that's done. So let me get the other one, the intake one, done. I'm gonna clean the inside of this thing out a little bit, and then I'll show putting the piston on. Alright, guys, so the next thing we need to do is get this thing ready for the piston cylinder and all that to go on. This gasket sticks up a little bit, so you'll want to take a razor blade and cut that gasket off, so you've got a flat mating surface for your base gasket to sit on, just like that. And then also on this side, trim that off too. And one other thing that I didn't put on earlier was the cups that push rods go into. So make sure you stick those things on, or you don't want to forget those. Push those in. There you go. Alright, now the piston, this is it here. This is see the 25 stamped on it. This is a 25mm over. We just pretty much cleaned the cylinder walls up. Not trying to get any more performance out of it, just trying to get it to quit smoking. So what I'm going to do now is this comes as a kit. Most Hondas do not, but this one does. Piston, rings, clip, and all that comes together. It's actually very inexpensive for these Recons. You do have to purchase the piston pin, which I like to replace those separately. So I'm going to stick all this back together. Start off with is the clip. Get one of those out, stick it in the side. You don't want to leave the clip to where I don't know if this makes any difference or not, but this is what the manual says. There's a little notch there for you to catch under the clip and pop the old one out. You don't want to have the open hole right there, open gap of your clip left in that hole, so spin it around. So I'll put one clip in there, lube that piston pin up, stick it in. This piston also has an end stamped on it for the intake side, and in this case, as in most Hondas, the intake is at the rear. So as it's sitting here, this is the front, this is the rear, so your piston will be sitting in at this orientation. So I'm gonna get all that snapped in there, and probably get the piston rings lined up like this should be. I still got to clean the cylinder up. It was bored, but got to get the old gasket off the bottom of it, and clean it up too. I just take soap and water and clean the inside of the cylinder to get any grinding or any boring material that still may be left in there. I like to clean them up real good just to make sure it's real clean before I put a piston in it. So alright, so I'm going to stick this on. I'll cut the camera back on right before I put the cylinder on. Alright guys, I got the piston in there to clip on this side and the piston pin. I did put a little lube on that pin just to get it to slide in. I just wanted to cut the camera back on and give you a little tip here. When you go to put this clip on this other side, make sure you shove something down into the cylinder, or into the crankcase, like an old rag or something like that, because 9 times out of 10 when you're pushing this clip in there and that thing kicks out or goes somewhere else, it will fall down into the engine. And that's very tough to get out, and you don't want that bouncing around inside there. So make sure you put something in here to keep it from falling in the engine. It's another thing if it flies through there and then you can't find it, but at least you know it's not in the motor and you can find another clip. So alright, just wanted to include that just to try to let you learn from my mistakes, because might not live long enough to make them all yourself. So alright, cut the camera back on and get ready to put the cylinder on. Alright guys, next order of business is putting the rings on. The way this works, you got 4 different rings, well 5 different rings I guess you call it, in the packet. The first one to go on is this funny looking one, the one that kind of looks like a spring. It goes in the very bottom, and this is the way I've always oriented these things. Different manuals say different things. The biggest thing is you don't want any of the gaps, the end gaps of your rings, to match up. So what I've got here is I'll mark it on top of the piston. That's actually called a oil ring. The oil ring gap or crack is right there. Alright, so the next one you go in will be the real small looking rings. There's 2 of them that are identical. Those go on the top and on the bottom of the oil ring, and I usually orient those over here on this side like there. So the top one is here, and then the bottom oil ring will be over here on this side. And another little tidbit of information is you don't want to stretch these things out too far. Just separate them just enough to get them to slide over the piston. There's no sense in cranking them way out. Alright, so that gap there. Alright, and we've got 2 rings left. You have, in this case, you've got a dark looking ring and then a shinier ring. They have RN stamped on the dark one and R stamped on the lighter one. The dark one goes on next. That'll be your second ring from the bottom. And I also will orient it over here with at the same location that the oil scraper ring is. No, I said I didn't want to make all these lined up, but there's a ring between them there. So, and then the last ring, and also these rings are installed with the writing facing up. The last ring is the one with the R stamped on it, and it will be installed completely 180 degrees from the dark colored ring. So you've got the dark colored ring here, and then the gap for the top ring is here. So that's the way I've always done them. I've never really had a problem with the rings that's smoking because of rings or anything like that. So that's what I do. You can go that route, or you can do your own method, but the biggest thing is not to let the gaps line up. So alright, I'll get the cylinder cleaned up and cut it on right before I put it on. Alright guys, ready to put this top end back on this little Recon. I went ahead and been doing a lot of cleaning since I had the camera on last. Went ahead and cleaned this jug out. Had it bored, and I usually clean them out with soap and water, and then dry it out real good, and then take transmission fluid on a rag and wipe the inside of it. And usually use some little small rags like this. Do it three or four, actually probably 6 or 8 times until the transmission fluid comes out clean, and that helps get up or clean up any of the fine boring grit that may still be in there from the hone or from the actual cutting process. And I've always done that. My engine guy recommended doing it one time to me, and I've done it ever since. And I guess I've really never had a problem with a ring seating up or anything like that. So got that cleaned up. Also went ahead and cleaned this with some brake cleaner. The mate surface here. Have both the dowels. Get the rag out of here because we got everything in there now. Have both the dowels in. 2 dowels here. They're on the front side of the motor. Next thing you need to put in will be your base gasket. And of all the gaskets on this bike, you've probably noticed I've put some silicone or RTV on every gasket. This is the one gasket that you do not want to put it on. I've actually had problems with this in the past, so I don't do it anymore. But I used to put silicone on, or RTV on, these base gaskets, and I guess the pressure from the head and everything pushing down on it, it would actually break this gasket and, for lack of a better term, squish the gasket out to the side and cause a leak. I actually had that happen 2 different times within about a month of one another. Not particularly on a 250 Recon, but on a 350 Rancher. So I don't put any type of silicone or anything on these base gaskets, and actually they don't have anything when you get them from the factory. So the additional RTV and stuff's just additional in this case. So now got your dowels in, got your gasket on, your rings, they're still oriented in the same position that I went over earlier. And what I usually do is just sit this cylinder down on here real easy, and the piston's at top dead center, so it's stuck all the way out the top. And I take a small screwdriver like this here, and usually get the cylinder kind of going in at a little bit of an angle so that you can get one ring in, and you just push the other side, the ring on the other side of the piston in, and it will slide on. This piston here, or this cylinder here, is actually set up a little different than most of them. It's got 2 notches on the bottoms, front and the rear, and it actually makes it a little easier to get the ring in, because you can push the ring in after it gets up into the cylinder. So just keep working it down like that. Just use some patience, and it will go on. Kind of tap it with your hand. You don't really want to force it down, because you can end up bending these rings over and doing all kinds of damage with them. The biggest thing is to make sure your piston's going up in there square, and that's the easiest way to make sure it will go down good and not pinch one of your rings. Got that one in. Just want to keep an eye on it all the way around. kind of wobble your cylinder back and forth, and that will help it get centered up. And it's centered up on there now, so it should slide down very easily into the crankcase. Get down to those dowels, it gets a little tougher. So there you go, that's how you put the cylinder on. I put those cam followers in there earlier, so the next thing to go on will be the cylinder head. There again, clean this mating surface up with some brake cleaner. And I reuse the gaskets on these. They're metal gaskets, and there again, never had much trouble with them before. But I do put a light coat of something called copper seal. This stuff here for it's actually for forehead gaskets, and it helps that gasket seal up. There is a little bit of a coating of something on these when you get them from the factory, and like I said, this is one that's already on here, so it's coated up, as you can see. Slide it down on here. I am missing the dowels. I'll have to find them. I believe they're in the tote over here. Yeah, I got to find one more. I got one dowel here. These dowels here go opposite of one another across the diagonal. Let me cut the camera off and track this dowel down, and then I'll cut it back on right before I put the head on. Alright, got it back. Found the dowel. It's in the bottom of my tote over there. Slide it down on there, and need to clean up that mating surface on the bottom of the cylinder head. Bear with me just a sec. Tell you, cleaning all this stuff up is about the most time consuming part of this whole rebuild. Making sure everything's clean when you get it go back together. Alright, so the head goes back on here like this. Actually, intake port toward the rear, exhaust port toward the front. Sits down on there, went right into dowels, and then you can put your nuts and washers back on. Got all those in a bag here. So the washers, or the cleaner washers, go on the inside here, and the dirtier ones go on the outside. I believe these are 12mm bolts, timing hole there. And I got that on. I'll torque these down. Let me give you guys the torque spec for this thing. I can remember how to put these together, but I can't remember the torque specs for every one of them. So the torque spec for it calls for 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds on those acorn nuts. You also got 2 bolts here you have to put in to hold the cylinder down. What I like to do is tighten the acorn bolts up first naturally, and then tighten these down, torque them down too. So let me get all that torque down, and then I'll cut the camera back on right before I put the rocker arms on. Alright guys, got the bolts torqued down, the 2 nuts, torqued down, the 2 bolts in the cylinder. This thing has 2 small dowels on the top. Also has another metal reusable gasket. This gasket here, I won't put any lube on it. There again, never really had any problem with these things leaking as long as they're not bent up or anything. And I don't really see a purpose in putting the RTV on a metal gasket. But this is the rocker arm cover, or rocker arm holders, I guess you'd say. And just about forgot the last thing to put on is these the push rods. Definitely need to put them in before you put this thing back together, because the pistons won't open and close if you don't put the push rods in. So I had these marked front and rear, so they just slide down in here. The holes in the gasket there keep kind of keep them held straight up and down so they halfway line up with the rocker arms. And then just slide your rocker arms over. Make sure you get your dowels lined up. I do like to pick up on these rocker arms as I'm sitting it in there just to keep some pressure on them and hopefully keep everything lined up. I think the thing just about has to go back together that way. It won't miss the end of the rocker. Alright, so now got to put the bolts in it. There's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 bolts around the top of this thing to hold everything together. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in, torque them down, and then I'll cut the camera back on when I get that done, and I'll show you how to adjust the valves and get ready to button this thing up right before we put it on the bike. Alright guys, I'll show you what I do to get it at top dead center. Just in case this thing moved or anything, I'll show you how to line it back up. Rotate this crankshaft bolt on this engine. This will be counterclockwise, and you turn it around. This is the intake valve until you see the intake valve open or go down, and then come back up and close. Okay, so there it goes down. See there? Then it's coming back up to close. So then what you do is look in this hole over here, this timing hole where we'd removed that plug earlier, like a 5mm Allen head. Look in this timing hole for a tick mark stamped on the side of the flywheel. Alright, so what you got in this case is there's a tick mark, and then there should be a mark that's got an F on it. That's when it fires. And then a mark with a T. That's when it is at top dead center. I actually went past it. It's tough to keep it on there. So the stator is got a little magnetic, so it's trying to spin this thing around. So I'm gonna have to probably hold it over there, but at least I might be able to show you the mark inside the hole here. So I gotta back it up just a hair. There it is right there. You can see the tick mark, and then there's a little notch right there. That's what you want to line up, that T mark with that notch, and that's top dead center. So then at that point you'll need to adjust these valves, and let me get the valve clearance here. In this case it is 0.13 millimeters for both the intake and the exhaust, so that's 0.005 inches. So 5/1000ths of an inch, and I hope if you've gone this far into it you know how to adjust the valves, but what good would a DIY video be if I didn't cover everything? So this is a 5/1000ths feeler gauge. You stick the feeler gauge in here on top of the valve. See, that's got a pretty good bit of play in it, very little resistance. The other side, pretty much the same thing. So what you have to do is take a 10mm socket, 10mm wrench, and they make tools for this, but if you watch any other videos, you know I'm not much on buying tools, special tools at least, and I can make one or figure out some way to make something else work. So if I can find my tool here, what you do is you break that lock nut loose at 10mm, and this has got a square shank on that adjuster. What I've found about the easiest thing to use is this is a deck screw that I bent. It's got that square shank on it, and it will fit right down on top of that adjuster, and you can spin it and do whatever you need to get your clearance right, and then tighten it up. So what you want to do is just tighten it down till you get a little resistance, and then lock that nut back down. And I like to check it again. Yeah, it feels pretty good. I usually like to make them a little tight right here on the initial check, because sometimes they'll loosen up right right when you first crank it. So yeah, these are still just a little bit loose. I'm gonna probably tighten them down just a hair bit more. There again, the whole time you're tightening this, you want to make sure you keep that on that T mark. I'm having to kind of hold it with the ratchet here to keep it on there. So all right, so I got that intake valve. I'm gonna do the exhaust valve, put these caps on, and probably go ahead and put the pull start on. And that will be everything on this bike except for putting this on the motor. So I'm gonna sit this in the floor and put one more motor together, and then I'll have this bike over here for long to put the motor back on. I doubt I'll show a video on the reinstall, but I may show a first crank up video just because everybody wants to see them, it seems like. So I'll keep you posted on this. Alright guys, this is a little Recon motor that we put together in this video, and everybody wants to see a first start up, so I've got my fingers crossed that it is going to start up, and we'll see what it'll do. Got power. I'm guessing the battery is going to be charged up enough. Cut the choke on and see what it does. It does nothing. Make sure it's getting gas. It's getting a little bit of gas because it's leaking out of the carburetor. Alright, try it with the choke off. There we go, we got one that'll crank without the choke. I'll give it a little bit of choke. This start button is not working quite right. Oh, steady. Not that much. Well, guys, I don't know what it's doing. Let me see if I can get it to crank. It sputtered there a couple times, but I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, I think we got it figured out. The carburetor wasn't getting any gas, so I pulled the fuel line off, let it run out on the floor a little bit, and held my hand over the end of the intake, and it busted off, so we're going to see if it'll do it again. There again, this start button is not the best in the world, so here it goes. As you can hear, it's running quiet. This thing will smoke just a little bit. Actually, it's going to smoke some out of the exhaust pipe for a little while until all of it gets burned out of the exhaust. And then when I had it bored, you can actually still see the little bit of residue left on the cylinder there. That'll burn off too, and it smells bad, but that's from the boring oil. So, all right, done with this one. Check out my other videos. Like, subscribe. Put a comment below if y'all got any questions about anything.